Before Olympus, before thunder, before even time itself, there was chaos. From that chaos were born gods, monsters, heroes, and destinies etched in fire across the skies. This is the story of Greek mythology, not as it was taught in school, but as it is remembered by the eternal echoes of the ancient world. Prepare yourself for a journey through creation, war, betrayal, and the power of the immortals. This is the story of the gods. The universe, in its most remote infancy, had neither form nor face. There were no words, no silence, no light, no darkness, no sky, no earth, no sea, no wind, only a still and expectant vastness, a totality without identity, a naked immensity. In that timeless, directionless abyss, something began to pulse, called a subtle vibration, a silent energy, a beginning. Thus was born the first. It was not an explosion, nor a miracle. It was an inevitable emergence. It was the necessity to exist. And from that necessity emerged the first presences. Gaia, the earth, fertile and generous, that would support all things. Tartarus, the deep abyss, darker than imagination could fathom. Eros, the primal desire that joins and separates, that propels change. Nux, the eternal night, who brought with her mysteries and fears. Erebus, the purest darkness, older than shadow itself. And later came Hemera, the day, and Aether, the celestial light. These were not gods, in the form we later came to know. They had no human shape, no moral will. They were forces, presences, living realities. And in their primordial dance, the world began to take structure. From Gaia's body sprang mountains, rivers, trees. From Uranus's sky fell the stars. And in the midst of it all, time began to flow. And with time came conflict. Because even at the beginning, the universe was not peaceful. It never was. The story of Greek mythology is a story of struggle, of love born from chaos, of war between generations, of fathers betrayed by their children, and of children who in turn feared their own heirs. It is a cyclical story, where every creation carries within it the seed of its own destruction. And yet, amid that primal violence, there is beauty, a deep, poetic beauty, an ancient truth that still whispers in our ears. For the ancient Greeks did not create myths for mere entertainment. Myths were explanations, encrypted language, philosophy disguised as story. They knew, perhaps better than we do, that life is made of contradictions, of joy and loss, of triumph and fall, of love and punishment. And so, their gods were not perfect. They were powerful, yes, but also jealous, violent, capricious. They had human desires and divine power. They were as divine as they were dangerously close to mortal. Zeus, the father of the skies, bearer of thunder, and yet unfaithful, impulsive, sometimes unjust. Hera, his wife, goddess of marriage, but also jealous, cruel, and vindictive. Aphrodite, goddess of love and beauty, whose power brought not peace, but burning desire and emotional chaos. Ares, god of war, not as a noble hero, but as fury incarnate. In this world of extreme passions, the human being was but a spark within a raging fire, a small actor upon an infinite stage, and yet one capable of defying the gods. That is why heroes were born, not as saviors, but as reflections of ourselves. Strong, weak, clever, stubborn, brave, and tragic. Hercules, the strongest, enslaved by his fate. Odysseus, the most cunning, condemned to wander in pursuit of home. Achilles, the fastest, the deadliest, the most human. Theseus, the noblest, caught in the web of his own choices. Perseus, Jason, Atalanta, Orpheus, each carrying a symbol, an archetype, a warning. Yes, in Greek myths there are monsters, giant serpents, one-eyed men, beasts with many heads. But the true monsters are often within, in pride, in rage, in envy, in unmeasured desire. And the punishments of the gods are not mere vengeance, but mirrors of what happens when the balance between the divine and the human is broken. Greek mythology, in the end, is a mirror, an old mirror, full of cracks, but one that still reflects the human condition with unsettling clarity. And the more you look into it, the more you see yourself. And the more you understand that these stories haven't died, because they are still happening. They still happen every time someone rebels, every time someone seeks love over logic, every time someone suffers for having loved too much, every time a man or a woman faces something greater and chooses to continue. So if you're here, listening, it's not by accident. It's because some part of you already knew these stories, because the echo of the gods still lives in your memory, and because somewhere deep in your soul, there's a hero who has yet to awaken. Prepare yourself, because now we return to the beginning, where it all began, where the universe was still a whisper, and myth became eternity. Chapter 1. The origin of the cosmos. In the beginning, there was only chaos. Not chaos in the way we often imagine it, not noise, not madness, not confusion, but an endless, silent, shapeless void. Chaos was the absence of all things, and at the same time, the source of everything. It was a yawning nothingness, a sacred stillness before time began to tick, before space had form, and before being had a name. Chaos was not evil, nor benevolent. It was the fertile silence in which potential waited. And within that sacred void, a stirring began. Something moved. Not abruptly, but as if awakening from a dream beyond dreaming. From this ineffable void, existence unfolded, not with thunder, but with inevitability. Gaia came forth, the earth. She was not born exactly. She revealed herself. She was solid and curving, firm yet nurturing, and infinite in her patience. She was the body of all things, the ground beneath every story yet to be told. In her womb, mountains would rise, forests would breathe, rivers would carve paths of memory. She was the mother of form. Next came Tartarus, a presence even deeper and more ancient than chaos. Tartarus was not simply a place, but a being, a dark abyss that underpinned all things. It was the realm beneath the realm, the prison for what must never rise, the echoing chasm where time decays and form loses meaning. If Gaia was life, Tartarus was the depth in which life is tested. Then appeared Eros, not love as mortals know it, but a divine compulsion. The very force of attraction, of fusion, of becoming. He was the invisible gravity drawing separate things together, the bridge between stillness and movement, between isolation and unity. Without Eros, no union would take place, no creation would unfold, no light would kiss shadow. In the shadows of this emerging cosmos, Nyx materialized. She was the night, silent and watchful. With her, Erebus emerged. Darkness incarnate, deeper than shadow, more ancient than void. Together they were the cloaks draped over the cosmos, the quiet breath before birth, the mysteries veiled in silence. Nyx was not fearsome, but awe-inspiring. From her came a host of entities, each with a role in the shaping of destiny. From Nyx's embrace came Moros, the inevitability of doom, Hypnos, sleep's quiet hand, Thanatos, the final breath, the Hesperides, guardians of twilight, the Fates, Clotho, Lachesis, and Atropos, who spun, measured, and cut the threads of all lives. Their power would extend even over gods. Light followed shadow. From the union of Erebus and Nyx were born Hemera, the radiant day, and Aether, the celestial light that crowns the heavens. They chased one another across the newborn sky, giving rise to the first rhythm, the pulse of time, the heartbeat of the world. Then came Uranus, the sky, broad and star-dappled, arcing high above Gaia. He was drawn to her with irresistible force. Their union was not merely passionate, it was the merging of firmament and flesh, heaven and earth. From their embrace came the Titans, 12 mighty beings, vast and powerful, embodiments of eternal forces and ideas. Oceanus, the encircling river. Hyperion, the light that reveals. Thea, the shining insight. Rhea, mother of generations. Minimicine, memory eternal. Themis, justice unbending. Coeus, inquiry and questioning. Phoebe, radiant prophecy. Iapetus, mortality's edge. Crius, constellations and order. Tethys, the nourishing flow. Kronos, time made manifest. Each Titan was a universe in themselves, and each bore within them the seed of triumph or ruin. But Uranus feared his own children. He saw in their eyes the future, the possibility of his end. To prevent this, he bound them, forced them back into Gaia's womb, locking them away beneath the crust of the world. Gaia groaned in agony. Her pain became the pain of the world itself. She forged a blade, a sickle of adamantine, and summoned her children to revolt. Most were silent. Only one stepped forward, Kronos, the youngest and boldest. As Uranus descended once more to embrace Gaia, Kronos emerged. From hiding, he struck. With the sickle, he severed his father's rule, and from Uranus's blood spilled upon the earth and sea, new beings were born. The Erinyes, or Furies, spirits of vengeance, forever haunting those who violate kinship. The giants, titanic forces destined to challenge the gods. And from the foam of Uranus's severed flesh in the ocean, Aphrodite would one day rise, the goddess of beauty born of agony. Kronos became the new ruler. With him began a golden age, or so it seemed. But the cycle had already begun its next revolution. Like his father before him, Kronos feared his children. A prophecy warned that one of them would overthrow him, so he swallowed them, one by one, Hestia, Demeter, Hera, Hades, and Poseidon. But Rhea, his sister and wife, grieved. When Zeus was born, she hid him, wrapping a stone in swaddling clothes and giving it to Kronos instead. Zeus grew in secret, in strength, in destiny. The silence of the cosmos was long broken. The world was now a stage of succession and struggle. Each new generation carried both hope and vengeance. The cosmos pulsed with drama, with cycles of power and punishment, of union and betrayal. And as the wheel turned again, the age of the Titans would come to an end. The age of the Olympians was dawning. And the myth, once whispered in the darkness, was now a thunder that echoed across eternity. Chapter 2: The Titans and the First Divine War. After Cronus mutilated his father Uranus, the sky bled upon the world. And from that blood, no flowers bloomed. Furies were born. Giants awakened. Beauty rose, and so did vengeance. That brutal act did not simply mark the end of celestial rule. It was the beginning of a new era, the age of the Titans. Cronus, the youngest Titan, had revealed his ambition. He fulfilled Gaia's will, seizing power through violence. But in doing so, he also opened the door to a cycle that would echo endlessly, children overthrowing their parents. The Titans were primordial beings, older than the Olympians, formed before the world took its current shape. 12 were principal. Oceanus, lord of the eternal rivers encircling the earth. Kos, of heavenly intellect. Crius, of brute force. Hyperion, titan of pure light. Iapetus, bearer of tragic inheritance. Cronus, time the destroyer. and their sisters, Phoebe, the prophetic, Mnemosyne, living memory, Themis, ancient justice, Rhea, mother of future gods, Thea, granter of vision, Thoth, Tethys of the deep sea. Together, they ruled reality for ages. Under Cronus, the universe breathed, but in fear. For Cronus, like Uranus before him, became a tyrant. He ruled not with wisdom, but with control. He did not raise his children. He devoured them. And Gaia, who once supported his ascent, began to suffer once again. The earth groaned under new captivity. Her grandchildren, the future Olympians, were not free. They were imprisoned in the belly of time. But all power born of fear is destined to fall. When Rhea, Cronus's sister and wife, became pregnant a sixth time, she could not bear to lose another child to the darkness. So, as Gaia once did, she devised a betrayal. When the moment of birth came, Rhea fled in secret to the island of Crete. There, among silent caves and ancient trees, she gave birth to Zeus. Instead of handing him to Cronus, she wrapped a stone in cloth and gave it to her husband. Cronus swallowed it whole, suspecting nothing. He believed he had cheated fate. But his downfall had already begun. Zeus was raised in secrecy by nurturing nymphs, fed on goat's milk and wild honey. He grew quickly, strong, wise, and full of the fire of his lineage. When the time came, he returned, not driven by hatred, but by purpose. His goal was not revenge, but to end the cycle of fear and restore balance to the cosmos. With the help of Metis, the wise goddess, Zeus tricked Cronus into regurgitating his swallowed siblings. Hestia, Demeter, Hera, Hades, and Poseidon, none had perished. They lived, trapped, awaiting release. Together, the six formed the core of the future Olympian pantheon. But Cronus was not alone. His siblings, the other Titans, still held dominion over the cosmos, and not all were ready to surrender their power. Thus erupted a war that would last 10 years. A war not merely of power, but of generations, visions, and destinies. This was the Titanomachy, the oldest cosmic conflict, a battle between what was and what could be. The Titans fought to preserve the old world. Massive beings rooted in the earth, sky, and sea. They stood like mountains, unwavering and proud. They followed Cronus, not out of love, but habit and fear. The gods fought with innovation, younger, faster, more strategic. Zeus hurled lightning from the sky like never before. Poseidon raised tsunamis and shattered coasts. Hades wove shadows and opened chasms beneath his foes. And they had allies, unexpected and mighty. The Hecatoncheires, hundred-handed giants who threw mountains as if pebbles. The Cyclopes, blind smiths of thunder who forged Zeus's ultimate weapon. For 10 years, the cosmos shuddered. Mountains cracked. Seas boiled. The heavens burned with every bolt. The earth wept with every blow. Humankind did not yet exist, but had they been there, they would have seen the world warring with itself. At last, the balance tipped. The gods triumphed, not through brute force, but through cleverness, unity, and a vision for change. Zeus did not destroy the Titans. He unseated them. The defeated Titans were cast into Tartarus, the same abyss Gaia had once borne. There, they were sealed behind bronze walls, guarded by the Hecatoncheires, their former kin. Yet not all Titans were condemned. Oceanus remained neutral and continued to flow around the world. Mnemosyne, memory, was honored and revered. Themis, justice, was embraced into the new divine order. Thus, the cosmos was not erased, but transformed. The time of the Titans had ended. The age of Olympus had begun. The gods would not be flawless, nor kind, but they would be different. And through them, new questions would arise. How far does power reach? Can a god love? Can a mortal defy fate? Questions that would not be answered quickly, but that would echo through eternity. From the moment Zeus's lightning split the sky, and Cronus's roar faded into the hollow of the abyss. Chapter 3: The Rise of the Olympian Gods. The echoes of the cosmic war had faded. The scars of the battle still marked the land, the sky, and the depths of Tartarus. But for the first time in countless ages, there was silence. A new order rose from the ruins of the old. The Titans lay chained in shadow, and the young gods, born of time and earth, began to shape a different universe. The age of Olympus had arrived. Zeus, the youngest son of Cronus, was recognized as the leader of the new pantheon, not by birthright, nor by tyranny, but by something deeper. His vision of a balanced cosmos, where every power had its realm, and every god their rightful place. To avoid repeating the past, Zeus did not cling to absolute power. He divided the cosmos among himself and his elder brothers. To Hades, he gave the Underworld, that silent realm where the dead dwell. There, in the deep places where light cannot reach, Hades built his dark throne, surrounded by spirits, rivers of forgetfulness, and sealed gates. To Poseidon he gave the sea, the vast, wild ocean, home to ancient monsters and the cradle of storms and shipwrecks. There, the trident ruled supreme, and Zeus kept the sky, the thunder, the clouds, the stars, and the oaths of gods and men. From atop Mount Olympus, he would watch over all. But Olympus was not ruled by Zeus alone. It was the throne of 12 great gods, each with their own power, their own story, their own storms. They were not distant abstractions. They were deeply human, with emotions, desires, flaws, and because of that, eternally alive. Theo, Zeus, father of gods and men, bearer of the thunderbolt, supreme judge, but also a voracious lover, guardian of oaths, and lord of storms. He was the force of order and contradiction. It was said his voice could shake the earth. His eyes saw the hidden truths. And his lightning did not merely destroy, it purified. Hermes, sister and wife of Zeus, goddess of marriage, fidelity, feminine royalty. But her story was marked by pain and wrath. She despised her husband's infidelities and punished with fury those who were part of his betrayals. Yet she was revered as the mother of the heavens, protector of women, and a symbol of pride and dignity. Far Demeter, Demeter wandare god. Some spake, I Dompica, werviken farde god, for Yenvaldia, I Dompica wand. Goddess of agriculture, harvest, fertile earth, the mother who made fields bloom and birthed the seasons. Her most remembered tale is of her daughter Persephone, abducted by Hades to the underworld. During the months Persephone remains below, Demeter mourns, and the world withers. Thus were born autumn and winter, and with her return, spring. Laksha, Hestia, goddess of the hearth, the sacred flame, domestic peace. She starred in no wars nor passions, but she was essential. She was the fire in every home, every temple, for every altar. Hestia was stability, silence, equilibrium, So powerful, she renounced her throne on Olympus to preserve the harmony of the gods. Atear, Orija, Adram Pikar. He was a bite, come to tear, past fear, come to tear, past fear, 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 past God of war in its rawest form. He was not strategy, but fury. The clash of shields, the blood on the battlefield, the scream in the chaos of battle. Son of Zeus and Hera, loathed by nearly all the gods, but worshipped by warriors who fell under his influence. Ares gave no meaning to war. He revealed it for what it was. Apollo, hollow god of the sun, music, prophecy, reason, twin brother of Artemis. Handsome, radiant, nearly perfect, he slew the serpent Python, inspired poets, and spoke through the oracle of Delphi, where mortals sought answers and received riddles. His light was not only that of day, but of an enlightened mind. Artemis, Artemis, Artemis Hobe, you counter, goddess of the hunt, the moon, virginity, and protector of the young. She roamed the forests, with nymphs and wild beasts. She was free, fierce, and allowed no intrusions. Her punishments were swift, and her presence often served as a warning against the abuse of power. Hadne Athena, born from the head of Zeus, armed and fully grown, having never passed through a mother's womb, goddess of wisdom, strategy, craftsmanship. She loved justice, but not sentimentality. She was cold, intelligent, visionary. She brought wisdom to war and protection to cities, especially one that bore her name, Athens. Hermes. Hermes, divine messenger, god of travelers, merchants, thieves, dreams. He wore winged sandals, a traveler's cap, and carried a serpent-twined staff. Hermes was swift, clever, unstoppable. He could pass through the underworld, and no one could hinder him. He was the bridge between worlds and between truths. Humlane, Hephaestus, the smith god, lame, deformed, yet blessed with the universe's most skillful hands. He forged thrones, weapons, armor, built automatons. In his forge, fire and art became one. Despised by his mother, Hera, yet he crafted the tools the gods themselves wielded. Aphrodite, goddess of love, beauty, desire, born from sea foam, from the blood of Uranus. And from the moment she appeared, the world was never the same. Aphrodite inspired longing, but did not promise eternal love. She was soft fire and sudden storm, married to Hephaestus, but loved Ares. She played with hearts of gods and mortals alike, and she never apologized for it. Dionysus, born of Deadpoint of the Spake Crioro, the last to join Olympus, god of wine, madness, ecstasy, theater, not just celebration, but liberation, the breaking of rules, the loss of identity. to find a deeper truth. His followers danced in the woods, drank without restraint, and reached states close to the divine. Dionysus was chaos, but sacred chaos. These were the 12 Olympians, each with their world, their contradictions, their lesson. And together, they formed the most complex, the most fascinating, the most human pantheon ever conceived. But the gods were not alone. With them lived lesser gods, primordial spirits, personifications of concepts, Nemesis, just vengeance, Nike, victory, Hib, youth, Eros, the unrelenting desire, each with a corner in Olympus, each with a story. And so, as the world took shape, the gods watched, some with judgment, others with indifference, and some with a dangerous smile. For the reign of the Olympians had begun, but the story of the gods was only just beginning. Chapter 4: Wisdom, Love, and Divine Punishment. Mount Olympus, lofty as it was no sanctuary of purity. It was not a temple untouched by conflict, nor a sky without blemish. It was a domain where the most powerful dwelled, but also the most emotional, the wisest, and the most unpredictable. The Olympian gods were complex. They were born from chaos, rose through war, and ruled with beauty, fear, justice, and whim. Each held dominion over an aspect of existence, but their stories were not confined to their spheres. They descended into the world, fell in love, punished, taught, and forever altered the lives they touched. 3 gods stood out especially, each representing a distinct form of intelligence, each mirroring a hidden aspect of the human soul. Athena, Apollo, and Hermes. Athena, the sharp and serene mind. Born without a mother, she burst armed from the forehead of Zeus, in a thunderous birth that split the sky. From that instant, Athena embodied wisdom, not the warm, nurturing kind, but the cool logic of an architect, the precision of a strategist. She was not the goddess of war like Ares, but hers was a warfare of calculation. Where Ares roared, Athena pondered. Where he charged, she analyzed. Clad in armor, haus ma trifect, orbi idea, not one, didsati on a golf that one, wielding spear and shield. Her true weapon was intellect. She taught mortals how to build, design ships, found cities, and resolve with strategy what others would settle with strength. Apollo, the light that reveals and burns, twin brother of Artemis. Like Artemis, born on the floating island of Delos, god of the sun, music, poetry, healing, and prophecy. He spoke in melody and judgment, brilliant as the noonday sky. But his clarity did not always comfort. For truth, like sunlight, can blind those unprepared to face it. Seekers came to Delphi, where the Pythia spoke in riddles on Apollo's behalf, not with clear answers, but with layered truths hidden in mystery. He was not devoid of emotion. He loved, pursued, and grieved. He loved Daphne, who fled and became a laurel tree. He loved Hyacinth, who died tragically. From his mourning, the hyacinth flower was born. Apollo showed that even light casts shadows, and that knowledge is not armor against sorrow. Hermes, the bridge between worlds, born in a cave, and walking mere moments after. He stole Apollo's cattle as a child, and when confronted, answered with wit, not denial. He offered the lyre in compensation, and so began his journey as a divine diplomat. Hermes was movement. He was language. He was boundary. the god who stitched together opposites, heaven and earth, life and death, truth and trickery. He alone could travel to the underworld freely. He delivered dreams to mortals in their sleep, and guided their souls in death. Hermes was adaptive intelligence, understanding change, not as threat, but as necessary evolution. But where there is wisdom, there is also punishment. For the gods did not forgive hubris easily, especially not from mortals. Many men and women, brilliant in beauty, art, or craft, dared compare themselves to the gods and learned the weight of such arrogance. Arachne, the cursed weaver, a mortal woman of unmatched skill, her tapestries breathed with lifelike detail. Confident, she challenged Athena to a weaving contest. The goddess, disguised as an old woman, warned her to show humility. Arachne refused. Their works were woven, Arachne's tapestry flawless, depicting even the gods' own misdeeds. Athena, humiliated, tore the masterpiece apart and transformed Arachne into a spider, doomed to weave forever. Ate Cassandra, the unheeded prophetess, daughter of Troy's king, loved by Apollo, who gifted her foresight in return for affection. She accepted the gift, but rejected the god. Apollo retaliated, not by removing her gift, but by ensuring no one would believe her. She foresaw Troy's ruin, her own doom, but her truth fell on deaf ears. A cruel punishment. To know the future, but never be believed. Sisyphus, the eternal toiler, a king too clever, who twice cheated death. For his deception, for Zeus condemned him to roll a boulder uphill for eternity, only for it to fall back each time it neared the top. Not pain, but futility. Effort without reward. The sentence of endless repetition. Tantalus, the forever thirsting, once favored by the gods, a guest at their divine feasts. But he betrayed their trust, serving them human flesh in secret. For this he was condemned, standing in water, surrounded by fruit, but never able to drink or eat. As he reached, the water receded, the branches pulled away. Desire denied forever. Diobe, the morning stone, queen and proud mother, she mocked Leto, mother of Apollo and Artemis, for bearing only 2 children, boasting of her own many offspring. The twins struck her down with divine wrath, slaying her children. Devastated, Niobe fled to the mountains, turned to stone by grief. Her petrified form still weeps when it rains. These tales, sometimes harsh, sometimes beautiful, always symbolic, remind mortals of the balance demanded by the divine. A balance that does not tolerate pride, that punishes excess, and teaches that love, knowledge, and power all come with a cost. Yet within these stories lie truths. That intelligence can uplift, art can transcend, and even punishment can enlighten. Greek gods were not merely cruel or kind. They were mirrors of our own souls. And in their myths woven with gold and shadow, they taught us to look inward. For there is no pride without downfall, no wisdom without sorrow, and no love without danger. Chapter 5. Man before the gods. In the vast theater of Greek myth, the gods ruled the skies, the seas, the earth. Thought of Lady, the one of all brow. They called the Underworld. But at the center of it all, there stood a small, fragile, and fleeting figure, the human being. He was not eternal. He was not invulnerable, nor was he all-knowing. And yet, within him, dwelled something that unsettled even the gods. The desire to understand, to create, to endure. Man was not the protagonist of creation, but a consequence, a late effect in the chain of myths. But once placed in the world, he became an imperfect mirror of the divine and at times its adversary. Locked Prometheus, the thief of flame. There was a time when humanity had no fire. They lived in darkness, feeding on raw roots, shivering from the cold, dying at the mercy of night. The gods watched from above. Zeus had chosen to deny them the sacred spark. Fire was power, and power had to remain in the heights, but not all gods shared that judgment. Prometheus, a titan of sharp mind and compassionate heart, saw something different in humans. The ability to learn, the will to create, the longing for a lost light. And so, in an act that would forever change the fate of mortals, Prometheus stole fire from the heavens and gave it to mankind. He gave them not only warmth, but culture. He gave them metalwork. He gave them the first symbol of rebellion, but the gods do not forgive easily, least of all Zeus. For his crime, Prometheus was chained to a rock, atop a lonely mountain. There, each day, an eagle descended to devour his liver, and each night, the organ would grow back. An endless torture, a punishment not just physical, but symbolic, for giving humans the ability to challenge the heavens, to think for themselves, to become too much like the gods. But Prometheus was not the only one punished. Humans would also pay a price, and thus the first woman was born. Pandora, the origin of suffering. Until then, men lived free of illness, of pain, of death. They were naive. Yes, but happy in their ignorance. Then Zeus, still wounded by Prometheus's betrayal, devised a subtler revenge. He asked Hephaestus to mold a woman out of clay. Athena dressed her with wisdom and grace. Aphrodite gave her irresistible beauty. Hermes taught her the art of deceit. And so Pandora was born, whose name means the one who possesses all gifts. She was sent to men as a gift, and a curse, and a curse. With her, she carried a jar, later interpreted as a box, that was never to be opened. But curiosity, that fire that burns even in the innocent, proved stronger. Pandora lifted the lid, and from that vessel escaped all calamities, disease, old age, hatred, war, despair. The world changed in an instant. Only one thing remained inside the vessel: hope. What does that mean? That even in tragedy, there is comfort? Or that hope is another form of punishment? An illusion that keeps us from giving up? Myths don't offer definitive answers, but they do raise questions that still haunt us today. The flood, the purging of mankind. As time passed, humans grew in number and arrogance. Zeus watched them with disdain. They were no longer the humble beings who had received the fire. They were arrogant, violent, corrupt. And so, as in many mythologies around the world, the gods decided to erase and begin anew. Zeus summoned the rains. Rivers overflowed. The sea invaded the shores, and the world was covered by murky, furious waters. Men perished. Cities sank. Civilization was swept away. Only two survived. Deucalion, son of Prometheus, and his wife, Pyrrha. Warned by his father, they built an ark. Build the wonder. Femme terrible. And floated for endless days in a drowned world. When the waters receded, the gods took pity, and Deucalion and Pyrrha, guided by an oracle, repopulated the earth by casting stones behind them. From Deucalion's stones came men. From Pyrrha's, women. Humanity had been rebuilt, but it would not forget what had happened. The ages of man, the inevitable decline. Hesiod, the poet of ancient myths, wrote that humans were not always the same, that there were ages, each more distant from the gods, each closer to oblivion. First came the Golden Age, where men lived like happy children, without disease or labor. They walked among the gods, and when they died, they became guardian spirits. Then came the Silver Age, with taller beings, but immature and violent. They disobeyed the gods and were punished. The Bronze Age brought warriors, strong, brutal, without compassion. They destroyed one another and vanished without a trace. The Age of Heroes was brief, but glorious. There lived the men who fought in the Trojan War, the great demigods who walked among the immortals, and finally came the Iron Age. Ours, the darkest, the most weary, the most distant from Olympus. Hesiod writes that in this age, men age quickly, betray one another, and respect fades away. Ancient values are corrupted, and only self-interest guides actions. But even in this age, we live, we love, we dream, and we keep searching. Man before the gods is not only a victim, nor only a rebel. He is a tragic creature, a past fear, aware of his smallness, but unable to accept his limits. He seeks answers, even knowing they hurt. He loves, even knowing he will lose. He defies, even knowing the gods are eternal, and perhaps for that, the gods look upon us with a mix of pity and respect, because where they repeat, we evolve. Where they punish, we endure, and where they are immortal, we are intensely human. Chapter 6. Heroes, Demigods, and Eternal Legends. In the vast tapestry of Greek mythology, where gods rule from Olympus and monsters dwell in the darkest corners of the world, there is a sacred place reserved for heroes. They are not gods, but neither are they mere mortals. They walk a lonely path between both realms, facing impossible trials and leaving indelible marks in the memory of humankind. Greek heroes are more than figures of legend. They are mirrors of our fears, our hopes, our eternal struggle to transcend. Each of them is born under an extraordinary fate. Many carry divine blood in their veins. They are sons of gods and mortal women, of kings and nymphs, of the immortal passion for the human. And with such origin comes a life carved by sacrifice. For to be a hero in the ancient world was not to be invincible or naturally glorious. It was to suffer, to fall, to rise again, and above all, to leave a legacy that would echo for centuries. Hercules, the weight of strength and tragedy. Among all the heroes of Greece, one shines with overwhelming force. Hercules, whom the Romans called Hercules, his name is woven with strength, but also with sorrow. Son of Zeus and Alcmene, Heracles was born with Hera's hatred chasing him from the cradle. The goddess, jealous of her husband's infidelity, attempted to kill the child while he was still an infant. She sent 2 serpents to his crib, but the baby, without knowing how to speak, strangled them with his bare hands. As an adult, Hercules fell victim to a madness sent by Hera. In a fit of rage, he killed his wife Megara and their children. To atone for his crime, he consulted the oracle of Delphi, which imposed upon him a titanic penance. He was to serve King Eurystheus and complete 12 impossible labors. The 12 labors of Heracles are a blend of brute strength, cunning, and supernatural endurance. From slaying the Nemean lion, whose skin was impenetrable, to capturing Cerberus, the guardian of the underworld, Hercules crossed the known world, faced creatures no other man dared imagine, and pushed the limits of the human body time and again. But beyond his physical feats, Hercules represents the suffering of the hero. No task comes without blood or tears. His tale is not one of costless glory, but of pain turned into eternity. Hercules does not end his life in peace. He is betrayed, burned alive, and only then reaches immortality, ascending to Olympus as a god. Yet even among the gods, his soul remains marked by the weight of his sins and the intensity of his mortal path. Zeus and the Minotaur, the labyrinth of man. Theseus, prince of Athens, embodies another kind of hero, the political one, the reformer, the symbol of intellect joined with action. His most famous deed is the defeat of the Minotaur, a creature half man, half bull, that lived in the heart of a labyrinth in Crete. Every 9 years, Athens had to send 7 young men and 7 maidens as tribute to Crete, where they were devoured by the Minotaur. Theseus, determined to end this humiliation, volunteered as part of the sacrifice. Once in Crete, he received the aid of Ariadne, daughter of King Minos, who gave him a thread to help him find his way out after facing the monster. The battle was fierce. Theseus not only defeated the beast, but emerged from the labyrinth as a symbol of liberation. Yet his story doesn't end there. He forgot to change the sails on his ship, as promised to his father Aegeus, who awaited him from a cliff. Seeing black sails instead of white, Aegeus believed his son was dead and threw himself into the sea. Since then, that sea bears his name, the Aegean Sea. Theseus represents the complexity of heroism. Someone who saves, yet also errs, who frees his people, but causes grief. In his figure, courage, tragedy, and the consequences of one's actions all collide. Perseus and Medusa, facing horror without turning to stone. Perseus is one of the oldest Greek heroes, and his legend dives deep into myth. Son of Zeus and Danae, his destiny was sealed even before birth. An oracle had foretold that he would kill his grandfather, who then locked his daughter in a tower. But Zeus visited her in the form of golden rain, and thus Perseus was born. Raised far from his origins, Perseus was tasked with retrieving the head of Medusa, a gorgon whose gaze turned people to stone. With help from the gods, Athena gave him a mirrored shield, Hermes winged sandals, and Hades a helmet of invisibility. He set off on his journey. He found Medusa asleep in a desolate land. Using the reflection in his shield, he avoided her deadly gaze and decapitated her. From her neck sprang Pegasus, the winged horse. Perseus would later use Medusa's head as a weapon against monsters and tyrants, and ultimately fulfilled the prophecy. Unknowingly, he killed his grandfather during a sporting event when a discus flew out of control. Perseus' tale is full of symbols: the deadly gaze, divine assistance, the inescapable fate. His story is the triumph of courage, guided by intelligence, and a reminder that no one truly escapes the threat of destiny. Jason and the Argonauts, the collective journey. Not all heroes fight alone. Jason led one of the most legendary expeditions in myth, the voyage of the Argonauts, in search of the Golden Fleece. The fleece, a symbol of power and kingship, was kept in distant Colchis, guarded by a sleepless dragon. Jason gathered Greece's greatest heroes, among them Heracles, Orpheus, Castor, Pollux, and Atalanta, and sailed aboard the ship Argo. The voyage was long and perilous. They faced monsters, enchantments, and the whims of capricious gods. But the most famous part of the tale is the encounter with Medea, daughter of the king of Colchis. Enchanted by Jason and gifted in the magical arts, she helped him pass the trials and escape with the fleece. Yet Jason's story has no happy ending. He betrayed Medea by marrying another. In revenge, she killed their children. Jason ended his days alone, forgotten, dying beneath the wreckage of his old ship. His tale is a reminder that glory fades and betrayal exacts a terrible price. Atalanta, the swift huntress. In a world dominated by male heroes, Atalanta shines on her own. Abandoned at birth by her father, she was raised by a she-bear in the forest. She became a legendary huntress, fast as the wind, strong and fiercely independent. She took part in the Caledonian boar hunt and swore she would only marry a man who could beat her in a foot race. Many tried. All failed, until Hippomenes used cunning. He tossed 3 golden apples during the race, and Atalanta, distracted, lost. They married, but forgot to honor Aphrodite and were transformed into lions. Her story, though tragic, speaks of love, autonomy, and the tension between duty and desire. Bellerophon and Pegasus, the fall of pride. Bellerophon is lesser known, yet his story is deeply symbolic. With the help of Pegasus, the winged horse, he defeated the Chimera, a beast with many heads. He became a celebrated hero, but pride overtook him. He sought to fly to Olympus and sit among the gods. Zeus punished him. A gadfly stung Pegasus, who bucked Bellerophon from the sky. He survived, but was left crippled and exiled. His story warns against arrogance, for even the mightiest hero can be undone by the desire to become divine. Chapter 7. The Trojan War. Some stories are born from the roar of battle, others from the whisper of a kiss. The Trojan War was born of both, of a man's desire and the judgment of gods. It was a war of arrows and swords, yes, but also of will, passion, betrayal, and vengeance. In it, the whims of the divine collided with the pain of the mortal. And though millennia have passed since the towers of Ilium rose above the plain, their echo still trembles in the hearts of those who listen. It all began with an apple. The judgment of Paris, when fate wears gold. At the wedding banquet of Peleus, a mortal, and Thetis, a sea nymph, all the gods were invited, all but one. Eris, the goddess of discord. Offended by the slight, Eris tossed a golden apple into the center of the feast with an inscription, "For the fairest." Instantly, 3 goddesses claimed the title: Hera, queen of Olympus; Athena, goddess of wisdom and war; and Aphrodite, goddess of love and beauty. Unable to resolve the dispute, they turned to Zeus, who wisely chose to avoid trouble by delegating the decision to a mortal, Paris, prince of Troy. The young shepherd was taken to Mount Ida, where the 3 goddesses appeared before him, not with humility, but with promises. Hera offered him power and kingdoms. Athena, wisdom and glory in battle. Aphrodite, the love of the most beautiful woman in the world. Helen of Sparta. Paris chose desire. He chose Aphrodite. He chose Helen's love, sealing with his decision the fate of his city, the Greeks, and generations to come, for Helen was already married to Menelaus, king of Sparta. The abduction of Helen, the beginning of the storm. Aphrodite kept her promise. With her aid, Paris traveled to Sparta and won Helen's heart, or at least her desire. Some say he abducted her, others that she followed him willingly. But indisputably, he took her to Troy, and with that ignited the spark of an unprecedented war. Wounded in his honor, Menelaus turned to his brother Agamemnon, king of Mycenae, who summoned the great Greek leaders to retrieve Helen and punish the Trojans. Among them were Odysseus, the clever king of Ithaca; Achilles, the invincible warrior; Ajax, the towering brute; Nestor, the wise elder, and many others. 1,000 ships were gathered, and they crossed the Aegean Sea to the shores of Ilium, where a siege began, one that would last 10 years. The Greek camp, alliances, egos, and resentments. The Greek camp before Troy was a crucible of powerful personalities, each with their own story. Though Agamemnon was the leader of the expedition, he was not the most beloved. His pride and arrogance led to conflict with Achilles, the greatest Greek warrior and son of the goddess Thetis. When Agamemnon was forced to return his concubine Chryseis to stop a plague sent by Apollo, he took Chryseis, Achilles' captive, in compensation. The insult enraged Achilles, who withdrew from battle. Without him, the Greeks suffered defeat after defeat. This inner conflict, This tension among men who shared a common enemy showed that the war was not only waged on Trojan soil, but within the hearts of those who waged it. The Trojan heroes, valor, nobility, and tragedy. On the other side, the Trojans were no mere victims. They were warriors, kings, and fathers. Priam, the aged king of Troy, had seen his city flourish. His wife Hecuba was his advisor and companion. They had many children, but two stood out: Paris, the catalyst of war, and Hector, the true hero of the city. Hector was noble, courageous, and tragically aware of his fate. He fought not for glory, but for his family, his people, his home. He knew Troy would fall, yet he did not surrender. His struggle was, in essence, profoundly human, to resist in the face of inevitable defeat. Divine intervention. Gods take sides. The Trojan War was not merely a conflict of men. The gods, like players on a celestial chessboard, took sides. Aphrodite, Apollo, Ares, and Artemis sided with the Trojans. Hera, Athena, Poseidon, and Hermes aided the Greeks. Zeus, sometimes neutral, sometimes manipulative, allowed destiny to weave itself with restrained freedom. Every battle was a dance of steel and divinity. Gods descended onto the battlefield, disguised or not, altering the course of arrows, inspiring valor or instilling fear, saving or dooming as they pleased. It was a war both earthly and heavenly. The death of Patroclus. The return of wrath. As the Trojans pushed the Greeks to the brink, Patroclus' friend or lover, according to some, of Achilles, donned his companion's armor and entered the fray, hoping to inspire hope. But Hector slew him in battle, believing him to be Achilles himself. When Achilles learned of Patroclus' death, he was consumed by grief and rage. His mourning turned into divine fury. He returned to battle, leaving rivers of blood in his wake. In a legendary duel, he faced Hector, killed him, and dragged his body behind his chariot, an act so brutal it horrified even the gods. Yet this horror gave rise to one of myth's most human moments. Priam, the aged king, sneaked into the Greek camp to beg for his son's body. He knelt before Achilles, kissed his bloodied hands. Achilles, moved, remembered his own father, and returned Hector's corpse. For a moment, the war paused, and in that silence, the weeping of enemies united by sorrow could be heard. The fall of Troy, cunning and destruction. Troy did not fall by brute force, but by cunning. Odysseus, ever ingenious, devised a trick. A massive wooden horse was built. The Greeks pretended to retreat, and a select group of soldiers hid within the horse. The Trojans, thinking it a peace offering, brought it into their city. That night, while they celebrated their victory, the Greeks emerged, opened the gates, and Troy was sacked. The destruction was merciless. Men slaughtered, women enslaved, children thrown from the walls. Poseidon's temple was desecrated, and the Greeks' crimes would haunt them even in their return. The fate of the heroes. No victory is eternal. Achilles did not live to see Troy fall. He was slain by Paris, with an arrow guided by Apollo, striking his only vulnerable point, the heel. Ajax, denied Achilles' armor, went mad, and took his own life. Agamemnon returned home, only to be murdered by his wife. Odysseus spent 10 years lost at sea, battling monsters, gods, and temptation. The Trojan War, which began with love and desire, ended, like all wars do, in ashes. But its story was told and sung for centuries. In Homer's Iliad, in Athenian tragedies, on temple walls, and in the imagination of entire civilizations. For beyond the events, the Trojan War is a story about the cost of choices, how a simple gesture can ignite centuries of pain, and how, even among gods and heroes, what defines us is not victory, but how we love, suffer, and remember. Beyond the realm of the living, beyond temples, fields, cities, and wars, there existed a place from which no one returned. A realm veiled in shadow, mist, and silence. It was not glory, nor was it punishment. It was the final destination. In Greek mythology, that place was the underworld, and though spoken of with fear, it was also mentioned with the certainty of the inevitable, because all roads, whether walked by heroes or mortals, kings or beggars, eventually led to the gates of Hades. The underworld was not hell in the Christian sense. It was not a place of eternal fire or pure torment. It was an organized, vast kingdom, divided into regions, each with a purpose. Governed by Hades, brother of Zeus and Poseidon, this subterranean world represented balance. Just as one of the three great gods ruled the sky and another the sea, Hades was entrusted with the realm of the dead. And though his name inspired fear, he was not an evil god. His role was to maintain the order of death, to ensure each soul found its rightful place. Chapter 8. The Underworld and Life After Death. To arrive there, the soul had to cross the rivers of the underworld. The most famous was the Styx, its black waters separating the realm of the living from that of the dead. Charon, the ferryman, awaited with his boat at the shore, charging an obol from each soul. The Greeks, aware of this, would place coins over the eyes or in the mouths of their dead to pay for the passage and ensure safe travel. Those who could not pay wandered eternally, without rest, trapped between worlds. The final entry required passing through gates guarded by Cerberus, the three-headed hound, fierce and monstrous, trained never to let anyone escape once inside. Only a rare few, like Hercules or Orpheus, managed to deceive or soothe him on their journeys to the underworld. Once within, the soul was taken before the judges of the dead, Minos, Aeacus, and Rhadamanthus. These determined each soul's fate based on the life it had lived. Was it just? Was it cruel? Did it honor the gods? The verdict was not born of emotion, but of balance and virtue. Between these extremes was the asphodel meadows, a gray field where most souls wandered. It was neither suffering nor glory, but a monotone echo of life. Souls drifted as shadows, repeating habits, feeling little, remembering even less. It was the fate of those who had lived without distinction, neither noble nor corrupt. For the wicked, those who defied the divine order or deeply harmed others, the punishment was Tartarus, a place even deeper than Hades itself. There, souls like Tantalus, Sisyphus, Ixion, and the defeated Titans suffered eternal torment. Tantalus, for instance, was condemned to stand in water beneath unreachable fruit trees, forever thirsty and hungry. Sisyphus was fated to push a boulder up a hill, only to see it fall each time he neared the top. These were not merely physical torments, but symbolic ones, burdens heavy with meaning. For the righteous, those who had lived with honor, the reward was the Elysian fields. There, in golden meadows, blessed by sunlight, souls rested peacefully, reliving their finest memories in the company of heroes and sages. Some even believed the soul could be reborn from this paradise, beginning a new life, continuing to learn. The figure of Persephone, queen of the underworld and wife of Hades, added a layer of duality. Daughter of Demeter, goddess of agriculture, Persephone spent part of the year in the underworld and part above. Her descent marked autumn and winter, her return, spring, life and death, thus were part of one same cycle. Her story, whether it be a tale of abduction or fate, love or sentence, revealed a profound truth that darkness is part of light. The Greek underworld was not a place of simple extremes. It was a moral and symbolic reflection of the human world. What you did in life mattered, not out of fear of punishment, but because death did not erase the consequences of your actions. Every myth of the underworld, Orpheus descending for love, Hercules facing Cerberus, Odysseus seeking answers from the dead, was a metaphor for the soul's worth, the weight of truth, and the hope that lies beyond the end. In Orphic tales and certain Greek philosophical traditions, the soul was not merely a passive traveler. It held the possibility of purification, of learning even after death. The righteous soul could be reborn, improve, escape the cycle. This vision would later influence Platonic and mystical thought. In the end, the Greeks knew that death was not the final chapter, but a doorway, and beyond that doorway, the soul would not simply find shadows, but the echo of who it once was, the judgment of what it did, and perhaps the possibility of something more. Chapter 9. The Mythological, Cultural, and Spiritual Legacy. When the temples crumbled into ruins, when marble statues were veiled in dust, and ancient tongues gave way to new empires, the Greek gods did not disappear. Their voices merged with the winds of the centuries, traveling from mouth to mouth, from quill to quill, from canvas to canvas. Because Greek mythology, more than a set of stories, became a cultural and spiritual force that crossed continents and eras. In Rome, this heritage was renewed. The gods were given new names. Zeus became Jupiter, Aphrodite became Venus, Ares turned into Mars, but their essence endured. The Romans did not merely adopt the Greek gods, they wove them into their own worldview, reinforcing their spiritual and political symbolism. In this way, Olympus survived the passage of time, camouflaged within the pantheons of the greatest empire of antiquity. With the rise of Christianity, many believed the old myths would vanish. But instead of dying, they transformed. They were reinterpreted as allegories, studied by poets and philosophers, preserved in medieval manuscripts, and rediscovered with fervor during the Renaissance. Artists like Botticelli, Michelangelo, and Raphael painted the gods as archetypes of beauty, drama, and humanity. Thinkers like Pico della Mirandola and Marsilio Ficino saw in the myths a hidden wisdom, a reflection on human passions, the soul, and the cosmos. In modern literature, Greek mythology remains an endless source of inspiration. From Shakespeare's tragedies like Troilus and Cressida, to contemporary retellings, such as the novels of Rick Riordan, these myths continue to spark the imagination of new generations. Even in pop culture, video games, series, comics, and films, the gods and heroes remain ever present in more accessible forms, but no less powerful. Names like Achilles, Athena, Hades, or Medusa have become part of our everyday language. Yet beyond their aesthetic beauty or artistic value, these myths remain alive because they speak to the human soul. They show us our fears and desires, our doubts and hopes. They confront us with fate, death, injustice, power, love, and sacrifice. In an age where everything changes so quickly, the myths remind us that some truths are eternal. Compared to other mythologies like Norse, Egyptian, or Hindu, Greek mythology stands out for its psychological depth. It does not portray the gods as wholly just or perfect beings, but as entities with emotions, flaws, passions, and contradictions. This divine humanity is perhaps what has resonated most through the ages, for in looking at the Greek gods, we don't merely see superior beings, we see ourselves reflected in their stories. The myths were also a way of explaining the world: lightning, the sea, the seasons, echoes, constellations, but they weren't cold explanations. They were soulful tales that offered comfort, warnings, or inspiration. They explained natural phenomena, yes, but also emotions, the rage of Ares, the wisdom of Athena, the passion of Aphrodite, the cunning of Hermes. Each myth was a doorway into understanding existence. Even today, Greek myths are taught in schools, performed in theaters, studied in academic circles, and reimagined in modern media. They continue to be subjects of spiritual, psychological, and philosophical reflection. In a world that often feels fragmented, they offer narratives that speak of wholeness, of cycles, of invisible threads between the human and the divine. Perhaps this is the true legacy of Greek mythology. To remind us that, no matter the era, culture, or context we live in, we all ask the same questions. Who are we? What is the meaning of suffering? Is there such a thing as fate? What lies beyond death? What does it mean to be human? The myths do not offer simple answers, but they invite us to look beyond the surface, to listen to the voice of the ancients, to remember that, even in the stones of a ruined temple or the echo of a forgotten verse, the wisdom of those who once dreamt of gods still beats softly, waiting for us to understand ourselves through them. And so, as we reach the end of this long journey through Greek mythology, there is nothing left but to sit in silence, on the edge of the world, or in the quietest corner of the soul, and reflect on what we have heard. We haven't merely recited ancient stories. We've touched, through imagination, the dust of crumbled temples, the marble worn by time, the flames of sacrifice, and the tears of heroes. We've followed proud gods, wise queens, fearsome monsters, and brave mortals who dared to challenge fate itself. But perhaps the most important thing is not to remember the names or the battles, but to understand why these tales still echo. Because every myth, at its core, is a mirror, an echo of who we are. They show us that even the gods have doubts, fall in love, make mistakes, and fight, that heroes bleed, that even the divine can tremble in the face of death, love, or oblivion. Greek myths do not offer simple morals. They offer profound questions. And they offer beauty, a beauty that lives not just in glory, but in tragedy, in downfall, in the fragile truth that all living things share. The ancients knew that myths were more than mere stories. They were memory. They were the way a civilization spoke to itself, generation after generation, about what it means to exist. Today, in remembering these stories, we are not only looking back, we are also looking within. And perhaps, like Odysseus at the end of his long odyssey, we discover that every outward journey inevitably leads to a return to the soul. Thank you for joining us on this journey through gods, heroes, passions, and mysteries of the Greek world. May these ancient voices continue to light our nights like stars that never fade. Until the next story.